Good evening and welcome to the second lesson of meditation from Sinai. Thank you all for joining us. Tonight's class is titled Mind Yourself and is I think, a fascinating discussion, fascinating limud, a study of deep Hasidic wisdom in a form of contemplation and meditation. So many of you have received the beautiful new textbooks. Those of you who are here in person have them. Some of you were able to pick them up over the last few days. We will be able to share some of the text that we will be reading on the Zoom, so we could follow along as well. However, I highly recommend that you get your own book in time for next week, so it'll be easier to study that way. There's additional readings, and we don't read all the readings inside during the class, so it's good to have your own book. So be in touch with me throughout the week, and we'll arrange a time where we could pick up the book or drop off the book. Okay, so last week, mind control, we spoke about the idea that our minds control our moods, our hearts, our emotions, our feelings. If we're feeling down, we're feeling anxious, we're feeling stressed out, we're feeling sad, we're unhappy, the way you control our thoughts, that is what controls our mood as well. If we're able to control the thoughts that come into our mind, we think positive things that bring us into a joyous mood, that itself causes the person to also feel that feeling. We had what I thought a beautiful experience through this meditation from Rabbi Label Wolf, where we were able to put ourselves into that situation and that mindset where we were upset or we had that negative emotions, and then through changing our thoughts, we were able to feel how we are now in a different space, a better space, and our moods would change based on that. So that was last week. And I think that was a good opening to the course, because ultimately our thoughts is our surface consciousness, which means it's not really who we are. It's not changing anything. It's our thoughts. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take the next step. We're going to go a little deeper beyond the surface of our consciousness, and we're going to discover a deep spiritual awareness. So we're going to discuss tonight spirituality. And how could we relate to something which seemingly is abstract, is foreign? We can't touch it, we can't feel it. What is spirituality? Look at page 38, we have the exercise. How would you define spirituality? Is there a definition for spirituality?
Unfortunately, there are multiple definitions.
Oh, Eric, you're exactly right. There are multiple definitions. There is no one set definition for spirituality. In 2005, they had a survey, and the researchers found 27 different explicit definitions of spirituality, right? And many of them didn't really overlap with each other. So it's very broad. We all have our own definition. What is spirituality? Now, for us, human beings, living in a physical world, a materialistic world, we see everything through the physical. We see it through our physical eyes, we hear it, we feel it, we have our five senses. So naturally, we see things through the natural material reality. So when it comes to spirituality, some of us have a little bit of a difficult time with it. Now, some may say, well, I'm a very spiritual person. I do connect, I do sense something beyond the material and physical world. But many of us may approach spirituality with, like, I don't know, it just doesn't talk to me. I was recently talking to someone, and we're talking about he had a question on the Jewish idea. Why do we do X, Y, and Z? And I started giving a little bit more of a spiritual oriented type of answer. And then right away they're like, don't go. Once you go down that path, you talk about the spiritual. It doesn't talk to me. It doesn't talk to me. If it's not concrete, if I can't see it, I can't feel it, I can't touch it, I can't sense it with my five senses. It's just not there. Maybe he's a believer. He's not saying, he's not denying necessarily that there is the reality of a spiritual reality, but it's not my world. It's not my reality. And perhaps some of us feel this way as well. And then there's obviously, we do have some type of idea and sensitivity to spirituality. Sometimes when we kind of have like a majestic view, a beautiful scenery, we understand there's a spirit over there. There's something spiritual. But the question is, can each and every one of us, can we develop a sensitivity to spirituality? And in our context, the question also is, what is spirituality? What is it? Now, we're not going to talk about spirituality from a secular standpoint. We're talking about in the context of Judaism, godliness. What exactly is spirituality? And that's what we're going to discuss today. And what I'm most excited about this class is because towards the end, the last 20 minutes or so, we study a discourse from a Hasidic discourse, which is, I think, so powerful. So we studied together, and we see how this becomes so real. It becomes so real in our lives. Okay, so the quest for spirituality starts at home, within each and every one of us. To appreciate spirituality in the world around us, we must first identify it within ourselves. So we obviously know, it's no big news to us to say that we all have a spirit within us. We call it a neshama, right? Our soul. And what is our soul? We're not going to get into too, we all know that we all have a neshama. God blew a spirit within us. But the soul, the way it's explained in Tanya and other places, is not only the source of vitality, of life for the body. The neshama gives us life. It's more than that. The neshama, our soul, has its own consciousness. There is the body's consciousness, and then there is the consciousness of the soul. What's the body's consciousness? Anything material, anything physical. That is what the body really identifies with, relates to. Self-gratification, satisfaction, to perpetuate itself, ego. That's the body's consciousness. We're not saying negative. It's not evil, but it's worldly. It's materialistic. That's the language of the body. The soul isn't only what gives the body life, but the soul has its own consciousness. The soul sees life very differently. Look at text number 3. We're jumping to text number 3. I share the screen quickly so we could follow along. I hope I get this right. Oh, here we go. Text number 3. It says in Proverbs, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, the human soul is the candle of God. We compare the soul to a candle. Now, what's unique about a candle? So we have some props over here today. We got a candle. Beautiful, beautiful candle. If we look at this candle, hope you see it on the screen as well. Look at the flame. What's the flame doing?
Reaching up.
Reaching up. What else? Flickering. Okay. It produces light. Right? No matter if we turn the candle sideways, the flame always goes up. And like we mentioned, it also flickers. It's not staying still. It flickers. So we're not here to discuss the science behind it. But what is the spiritual idea behind a fire flickering up? The Tanya teaches us in text 4. Tanya teaches us there we go. The nature of a flame is to flicker upward, indicating that the flame intrinsically seeks to part from its wick in order to unite with its source above. Similarly, the human soul naturally desires and yearns to separate itself and escape its body in order to unite with its origin and source in God, the blessed source of all life. In other words, we have a soul. The soul is in our body, gives us life. But truthfully, there is a struggle every single moment of life because the soul does not speak the language of the body. Like the fire that is trying to depart, to detach itself from the wick, and it's being forced by the wick, held down against its will. The soul wants to go up to heaven, to the spiritual reality. It doesn't talk the language of the soul. It's homesick. You ever think back to the first time you left home, whether it was an overnight camp or whether it was to a high school or to college, university? I know my experience, it wasn't that pleasant. We know what we did under the covers when no one was looking, right? We don't feel that embrace of our parents. We don't feel comfortable. We don't feel, we're not surrounded by the people that we're used to. It's a foreign atmosphere. The soul has its own consciousness, and the materialistic consciousness of this world and of our body is foreign to the soul. The soul wants to detach itself, and it's being forced against its will. The body is not aware of anything which isn't materialistic. The soul, on the contrary, it's not aware of anything materialistic. All it knows is something above, something greater, which means the soul is not only the search for meaning, it's a lot more than that. It's the search, it's the awareness of the divine. So in this context, to answer the question, what is the definition of spirituality? The definition is the awareness of a divine presence beyond the material surface of our reality. That is what we mean when we say spirituality, the awareness of a divine presence. However, what is our default consciousness? Our default consciousness is the consciousness of the body. That's what we see. That's what we see around us. We see good coffee. We see a good piece of food. We see a nice vacation. We see a nice home. We see materialistic pursuits. That's what we see. Yeah, we got to read the book and learn about godliness, about the divinity. You know, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Barditcha, one of the great Hasidic sages, he once turned to God with a complaint. What was his complaint? He said, God, listen, you can't blame us. What did you do? You put in front of our eyes all the very enticing materialistic pursuits and all the godly ideas you put in the book. If you would have done the opposite, you put godliness all in front of us. This is what we see and hear all day long. And the materialistic pursuits you put into a book. we would do a lot better. So although we know what the soul wants, but that's not the default settings on our phone. That's not the default setting, right? In our consciousness. Every once in a while, the soul knocks on our door. It says, hey, I'm around. A new child is born. Wow, the baby, right? We feel something. We feel the spirit. Something exciting happens. We see a beautiful, beautiful piece of art. We see the spirit. It's almost like the soul is peeking at us, but it's not there. It's not it's not a complete awareness of the soul's perspective of godliness. So this is point number one. Point number one is, what is spirituality? It's the awareness that the soul has of God, that there is a divine reality, and that is a true reality. That's what it lives. So before we go further, we're going to do a short meditation on this idea to think about the soul's reality within each and every one of us.
We have two voices speaking to us from within. One voice is our lower order self, Nefesh Bahamis. The Nefesh Bahamis urges us to live a life of pleasure, of ease, getting what we want whenever we want it. The other voice is the voice of the Nefesh Elokis. That's our godly self. That's the self that seeks connectedness with people in love, connectedness with the world and its elements, feeling fulfilled, connectedness with Hashem. Gently close your eyes and just become aware of your inner self, your inner quiet, that place you can escape to, because it's always a place where you have your own sense of self. Allow that special place to be your refuge, that place of inner sanctity, totally protected, always safe. As you step out of that space, become aware of your two inner voices. Listen to the voice of the Nefesh Bahamis. Note what it tells you. It says, you're insecure in this world. You need to shore yourself up. You need more and more and more. Otherwise, you're unsafe. Build walls around you. Wealth. Create superficial pleasures, because life is short. The Nefesh Bahamis is the voice of the ego. Now listen to the truer voice of the Nefesh Elokis, the voice that tells you that everything possesses truth and meaning, that your happiness and joy comes from connecting truly to people, to the world around you, by connecting to the inner selves, the soulful center. The voice that tells you pleasure doesn't come from material acquisition. It comes from the smile of appreciation for having helped someone, for the small gift that you give your grandchild, for the blue sky that you wake up to. In life, choose which voice you are going to listen to. It may be that you don't need to have a battle within, a fight between them. You might even be able to transform the Nefesh Bahamis into an ally, giving its energy the capacity to do the right things. But always allow yourself to recognize that your true voice is the voice of the Nefesh Elokis. In so doing, your life will be replete with happiness and fulfillment.
Okay, what a powerful meditation. By the way, these meditation videos are also in the email, the follow-up email that we send out after the class. So you could always go back to it to use this meditation to remind ourselves about this meditation as well. So, so we know we have these two souls within us, these two consciousnesses within us. And we had a meditation to think about it. What we're going to discuss now is the form of meditation that we use to really live up to that soul perspective, right? That's the goal over here, right? The goal of life is that although we have a body, but the body is to be a tool and a manifestation of the soul's perspective, right? And again, we're not talking about evil sinners. We're talking about materialistic selfishness. Because by definition, if we are giving into the body, we're giving into ourselves, into our own ego. So we want to live a life true to the perspective, the divine perspective, the divine awareness of the soul. And it's easier to have it intellectually. It's more difficult to live by it. So what do? So there are various paths that we have within Judaism itself. As we mentioned last week, we're not talking about other meditations that we have in other religions and even in other forms of meditation. We're talking organic Jewish methods of meditation. So if you look on page 48, figure 2.1, you see there are two general paths to this. One is called hitbodedut, and one is called hitbonenut. They sound very familiar, they're very similar. Hitbodedut or hitbonenut. What's the difference? Hitbodedut means to be secluded, to be alone. Badad means alone. To detach from the material engagement. And hitbonenut, with an N, means to contemplate, to develop a spiritual awareness. So what does this mean? So let's talk about hitbodedut for a moment, but we're going to actually focus primarily on hitbonenut, on the second method. Just imagine you want to hear a really beautiful, solemn melody. Well, you want to play a melody. You want to turn on your music at home, your speaker system. You want to listen to a melody. What's the issue at hand? The issue is that you live in the Seitlin residence. You got 6 kids running around making a lot of noise, and it's extremely difficult to listen and even hear the melody being played. Talking from experience over here. So what do? There are two options. Option number one is go into a room where it's quiet and lock the door behind you. Or better yet, leave the house, go to your office, go to Starbucks, go to a different place where it's quiet, go to a place where the noise isn't, go away from the noise, and now you can listen to this melody. That's option number one. Option number two is to crank up the volume. And you playing the music so loud that is louder than the noise, right? Two viable options. And these, I think is a good analogy to these two paths of hitbodedut and hitbonenut. Hitbodedut is to be alone, secluded. It means in physical space, to go out away from others, away from materialistic things, which means oftentimes people will go to the mountains, they'll go to a rooftop, they'll go to a desert, to a forest, to the water, a place where there aren't a lot of people there, or perhaps there are no other people there. And you feel a lot more connected to your soul. So it's not only about leaving, it's not only about being alone from other things, material things, but it's also an inner aloneness. Leaving, disengaging from the inner materialistic perspectives and consciousness, right? And we're really identifying and we are relating and tuning in to that consciousness, to that perspective, that awareness that of the divine of our soul. That's hitbodedut. For those of you who are familiar with the Breslov Hasidim, you could search them online and Google Breslov. This is a very strong path and a method within that Hasidic sect of Breslov, hitbodedut. We're going to focus on method number two, which is hitbonenut, contemplation. And in my analogy, it means to crank up the music. In other words, to hyper engage with our soul. And it's so strong and so powerful that it overrides the noise of the body. Any negative or foreign consciousness of the body is overridden by the consciousness of the soul, because it's so powerful, so real, that we could endure. The water is moving so fast that it breaks all the barriers. The train is coming down, nothing gets in the way. We feel the consciousness of the soul. It's so strong that we could be in a body. We could be living amongst other people. We don't have to be secluded, but it's real. It's not a distraction because we're so on target. The awareness of the divinity is so strong that nothing gets in its way. And that is through contemplation. And in Hasidic works, there's a strong emphasis on hitbonenut, contemplation. When we learn something, when we study something, we could understand it intellectually, but do we really connect to it? Is it ours? Do we own it? Do we feel it? Do we experience it? That's through deep contemplation. So first of all, we have to study a lot of the Kabbalistic and Hasidic wisdom of God to know what we are understanding, what are we aware of the divine, what is the divine, right? So we have a lot to study. So it's about knowledge, that's step number one. But it's not only about knowledge, it's also feeling it, living it. We could believe in something. But do I believe that I'm holding a bottle of water? I don't believe I'm holding it. I know I'm holding it because I'm experiencing it. It's real. When we say believe in God, it kind of connotes that it's not my natural sense of reality, but it's a belief. I believe in it because my parents told me, because I grew up this way, or on my own I came to the conclusion. But it's a belief. It's not who I am, right? It's not my life. My life is physical, right? Things that I could sense with my five, that's my life. Can we reach a point where spirituality, godliness, the awareness of the divine is our life. This is our default consciousness. It's not possible. It's possible through a rigorous contemplation, hitbonenut, time and again. Eventually, we could reach that.
You're talking about 24/7?
No, I'm not talking about 24/7. We're talking about on a consistent basis. So it's perhaps every morning, once a day, once a week, but regularly, right? How often do we go to the gym? We don't go 24/7, but we go there. We should go there regularly, right? If you go there once a month, it's not doing much. I'm not saying it's not. Going to the gym once a month is also a good thing. It's better than nothing, right? But if you go every day or twice a week, whatever the routine is, then it picks up some steam, right? And it has a much stronger effect. So what is hitbonenut? We look in text number 9. It's a letter that the previous Chabad Rebbe wrote. Text number 9 on page 49. Let me see if I can get over here on the screen. He writes as follows. A central foundation of the study of mysticism is to repeatedly spend considerable time in deep contemplation on the subject matter being studied. This is the practice that is referred to as hitbonenut, which means to firmly visualize the concept and to analyze it deeply. It says in Deuteronomy, "V'hashevoisa el levavecha," which means you shall take it to your heart. It becomes real. Meditate. When you meditate on something, it takes root. So the meditation is to contemplate on something where the person thinks deeply about an idea, visualizes it, breaking it down, analyzing it, and explores its application and manifestations. It becomes real. It's like looking at a beautiful piece of art. You kind of get lost in the art. It becomes so real. In the text over here, we don't use the word da'at, but some perhaps could use the word da'at for this, right? There's idea of intellectually understanding something, but then there is connecting to it, experiencing it. So I could study something, okay, I get it, beautiful idea, and I move on in life. Does it change me? Yeah, perhaps it does, to a degree, right? But it's an academic study. But then there is when we think about it, time and again, and we contemplate on it, deep contemplation. Now it's real. Now this is part of, right? I can feel it. I can see it. I can relate to it because it's internalized. So that's the true concept of hitbonenut. So what we're going to do tonight, we're going to, in order to help us develop a spiritual awareness, we're going to practice a form of hitbonenut, which is a specific type of meditation. To contemplate, right? Last week's meditation was to control our thoughts. Tonight's meditation is to control, to practice, to train ourselves to have a deep contemplation, not to get carried away, but to think about an idea deeply for as long as we could. So what we're going to do, as I mentioned previously, we are going to study a text with a concept from Kabbalistic wisdom, from Hasidic wisdom, about this idea of the existence of God all around us. We're going to understand it from an intellectual level, and then we're going to do a meditation on this. By the way, if there's any questions as we're going forward, maybe we can take a moment. If you have any questions or comments before we move on to text 13. Anyone? You don't have to be shy. No questions or comments. Okay. So text 13, it's a little bit of a longer text, but I actually really enjoyed reading this text. I'll tell you why. It was very nostalgic for me. And that is because this is a text, or what part of the text that I've studied in yeshiva. When I was studying in yeshiva, we used to study every morning. We used to study, in addition to the regular study of the Torah, of the Talmud, and of Jewish law, and Parsha, and other things that we studied. Every morning from 7:30 to 9 o'clock, for an hour and a half, we would study a Hasidic discourse on different spiritual ideas of the divine, of God, etc. Now 7:30 to 9 o'clock, and then we would do morning prayers, and then we would study till about 9:30 p.m. So it was a long day, but it started, the first hour and a half of the day was to study different Hasidic discourses. So this discourse is it's an excerpt of a discourse, text 13, from Rabbi Shalom Dovber Schneerson, who was one of the Chabad Rebbes. He wrote this in 1898. It was a full year of a continuation of a discourse, beginning with Rosh Hashanah in 1898, going through, I believe, maybe even into 1899, or even maybe in the year 1900. And he was there to develop an idea. Imagine that, someone who writes a few pages every week in a continuation to develop a thesis in godly wisdom, to develop an idea. It's powerful, it's beautiful, and he used to write very nicely, and really to bring out and to develop an idea in the most beautiful and profound way. So this is obviously just an excerpt, a few paragraphs from this lengthy Hasidic discourse. We're going to study it, we're going to analyze it. Just going in, there are 3 points that we could just kind of, it's a little bit of a longer text, but the 3 points that we're going to make over here. First of all, that everything in the world has divine energy, has like a soul, a divine energy. This divine energy is the main component of this existence. And because of that, we should value it more than we value the body of the existence. We should value the soul of it. So let's see how this is developed in text 13. Okay. Here we go. So we're going to read it slowly, and I'll kind of throw in some commentary as we're reading this. Everything that exists is comprised of a physical form and a spiritual. Everything, right? Meaning humans, animals, vegetation, inanimate, everything has, in addition to the physical form, it also has a spiritual, divine energy that creates and animates the entity's physical existence. This is clearly demonstrable in animals and humans. They have an animating spirit. If the spirit were to leave their body, the body would no longer be classified as alive, as the body would begin to decompose and turn to dust. That is because the very existence of the body hinges upon the spiritual energy that animates it. So it's very clear when it comes to humans and even animals. We see clearly that they have a life force, right? They are alive. And if once the person dies, the life force leaves, the body dies, it decomposes eventually, right? Does not live on independently.
So are you saying that do you think the spirit dies first before the body, or the body?
The spirit doesn't die. The spirit leaves the body.
Well, right.
So now the body doesn't have that spirit. So the body's left, it decomposes.
So when somebody dies, they're dying because their spirit has left.
Because their spirit has left, right? Then neshama left their body.
Not because they have cancer or.
Well, obviously, okay. It depends on what level. Meaning, obviously, there's the way it manifests is that the person perhaps the body is sick, the body is ill,
right,
and therefore it is not a proper recipient for the spirit, right?
Okay.
The way it plays out, obviously, everything we believe is from God, and the time has come, et cetera, et cetera. But meaning, we're not going to, it plays out in a way where the physical body sometimes is just not a vessel, it's not a recipient for the spirit, right?
Okay. I got it.
The same is true of vegetation. It also possesses an animated spirit. Even inanimate objects possess some sort of energizing spirit that keeps them in existence and prevents their disappearance. So even this table, this cup, right? What is it? It's all it is a piece of styrofoam. But there's a spirit and a divine energy that keeps it in existence. And without it, it won't be here. Based on this awareness, spirituality is referred to as good and life because it is a living force that remains alive in existence forever, whereas physical matter is referred to as negative and death because it decomposes and ceases to exist without the spirit within it, and it has no means of existing independently. So we refer to the body, the physical component of everything, as death. Not because it's dead, it's alive, it's here, I see it, I feel it. Death as in, it doesn't have its independent existence. It's only here because of something else. True life in this context, life means it lives independently. It's eternal. If it's not eternal, if it's dependent on something else, and once that force, that cause ceases to exist, the effect is not there. So the effect is not really here, even while it is here. It's only here because something is making it be here. So therefore, we refer to this as death. We're going to analyze this further, but this is just the basic understanding of the words over here. From my flesh, I can perceive God, is a verse in Job, meaning the human experience informs our understanding of God. So sometimes if we look into the human experience, how we operate, how we function, how the body functions, or this body and the soul functions, we can also understand how the rest of the world, how the rest of the universe functions as well. We intuitively sense that we have a life force. We intuitively sense that we have a life force that provides us with our life, and that it is our primary identity, and that were our soul to leave our body, the body will be left like an inanimate rock and eventually decompose and disappear. So when it comes to the human body, we feel this intuitively. We feel that I need my life force. Without it, I'm not alive. I'm not a person. I'm just a flesh and blood, right? So that we feel, we don't need to even think about it. It's obvious to us. The same is true with all that exists. The entire cosmos and all its contents exist due to a divine spirit that gives existence to everything. That divine light and force is the entire life and sustaining power of all that exists. If it departs, all existence will revert to absolute nothingness. Just like the body and soul of a human being is the same, the body and soul of the rest of the entire universe. The existence of it is dependent on its soul, on its divine energy, which gives it its life. If we meditate on this idea, we will realize that the material existence of each entity is entirely dependent on the spiritual force within it, and that physicality is nullified before the presence of the divine light that is its source of existence. This realization will inspire a powerful desire, love, and yearning for the divine. We will no longer desire that which exists only superficially, and which is in fact death, decomposing and disappearing. And all we will desire is to attach to the divinity that is true life and the mainstay of existence. So this is a deep teachings that attempts to reframe our whole life, and even more than that, the entire existence. So let's break this down. And if you have any questions or comments, please, I'd love to have the discussion. So we said there are 3 main pointers in this text. Point number 1 was that everything has a divine spirit. Not just human beings, animals as well, vegetation as well. A leaf growing on the tree has a divine spirit. And even inanimate things, rocks on the floor, the table, the plastic, the clothing, right? It doesn't move, it's not movable, it's not alive per se, but it has some sort of divine energy that keeps it going, that keeps it here. So this is true with like physical objects and the divine energy. But perhaps in order to relate to it better, we could also understand this with every action that we take, every experience that we have. We could also break it down into a body and soul. And we're doing this just to kind of relate to this idea of a soul, to something which seemingly is just dry. It's just the body, right? So for example, you look on page 56. Dinner with a spouse or close friend. You go out for dinner with your husband, with your wife, with your friend. What's the body of that experience?
Eating the dinner.
Eating the dinner. You look at the menu, right? Okay, I want this, I want that. Cup, yeah, we have the plate, we have the drink. That's the body of it. What's the soul of that experience? Spending the time together, companionship, building the relationship, right? That's the soul of this same action, the same experience. There's the body, there's the soul. Disciplining a child. What's the body of that? What's the body of discipline? The actual discipline. I'm taking away the knife. I am, trying to teach them that they have to sit in their place. They have to behave nicely. Whatever the discipline is, that's the body. What's the soul of it? Teaching moment. It's an expression of my caring and my love to the child to try to shape them when they're young, right? That's the soul of it. Exercising in the gym, shaking hands on a deal, right? And the list goes on, right? There's the physical handshake. That's the body of this action. But then there's the soul of the action, the agreement that this connotes, right? So now we shook hands, so we agreed to X, Y, and Z, right? So there's the body and soul in everything that we do. So the same is true with the physical as well. That we see something which seems to be just a body, it's just physicality, right? But there's a soul to it, there's an energy to it. Give you an example over here. Let's see if I could find this quickly. What do we see over here? What is this? It's a piece of art of a mother lighting Shabbat candles. You have the three children there. You have the candles. You have the glow. You have the beautiful, everyone dressed so nicely for Shabbos. They probably just took showers and baths. The white tablecloth, the whole atmosphere of the Shabbos touch, the Shabbos, spirit, the light of Shabbos. And it was beautifully brought out in this beautiful drawing, this beautiful piece of art, right? Now, if I look at this same piece of art with a technical, scientific lens, what do I see? What is this? It's a two-dimensional painting, which means it's a bunch of strokes of a brush with different colors on a canvas. That's all it is. Nothing more than that. It's lifeless. From a scientific standpoint, it's lifeless, right? And by the way, for those who are in art, we have any understanding in art, we know that what's a good artist? Not someone who knows how to draw nicely, but someone who's able to bring the picture, to bring the art to life, to infuse the life in the art. It's a talent, right? I could copy another artist and I can do the exact same strokes with the pen. but I'm not. Then it's just pieces. It's just marks of pen on a paper. It's not alive. It's not bringing in that life to it. A good piece of art has life. The life is the soul of this body, right? So we can look at it. Look at the body of it. It's dead. It's just colors on a piece of canvas. Or we could say, yeah, but look at the life. Look at the beautiful message. Look at the meaning. Look at the beautiful picture. Look at the beautiful story that this tells. The same is true. This universe is God's canvas. God is drawing this beautiful piece of art. And there are two ways we could approach this same universe. We could be the big scientist in the lab and say, look, all it is strokes of a pen. That's all it is. All it is just physical things. It's bodies, lifeless bodies. Or we could say, there's a beautiful picture over here. It's a beautiful artwork.
It depends if the artist is Jewish or not, basically.
Right? It's a beautiful piece of art. So we see the soul. So this is maybe some language to relate to the idea, even for some of us who perhaps don't really relate to the idea of the spirit, but we realize that there is a spirit. The same way we relate to the life of a piece of art, we could relate to the life within even the inanimate objects. And this life is the godly divine energy that keeps it alive. So that was point number one, that every single thing in the universe has a life force, has godly divine energy. Point number one. Point number two is that the spiritual soul, this spiritual energy, is the source of its existence. It's a source of its life. Meaning, it's not only another component to this thing. The life of the picture is not just another component to the picture. This is what's really making it what it really is, right? If it's a lifeless piece of art that sells for $1, if it's a beautiful piece of art that has life in it, it can sell for $100,000, right? It's really all about the life. It's all about the story it tells. The handshake is a handshake, but it's meaningless without the soul behind it, without the agreement behind it. And that is true with anything around us. Without the life force, without the neshama, the soul of it, the body itself is it's not worth anything, right? It's only a manifestation of this soul within it. And this leads us to point number three, which is really the final piece of the puzzle, which kind of wraps it all up, and maybe the most challenging is if 1 + 1 is 2, if there's 1 and 1, it equals 2, which means if everything has a neshama, has a soul, and the soul is what's most important over here, is what gives it its life. Without it, it's not worth anything. It doesn't have any vitality on its own. So what do we value? Do we value the body or do we value the soul? When we're speaking to a human being, who am I talking to? Talking to your forehead? Am I talking to your body? Or am I talking to the person? Talking to the person, right? I'm not talking to flesh and blood. I'm talking to a person, a neshama, a soul, a personality in a body. You know, there's a famous story, you might have heard it from me before, with the author of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, who raised his grandson. The Tzemach Tzedek later became great Rebbe. Last week we had a text from the Tzemach Tzedek, Rabbi Menachem Mendel. He was a young child. His mother passed away, died very young. He was 3 years old, and he was adopted by his grandfather, raised by his grandfather. So there's many stories, very cute stories, when he was a young child, the home of his grandfather. He one time took potatoes and he cut them in the shape of tefillin, and he would put on, these potatoes with he peeled the potatoes like the straps of the tefillin. There's a lot of interesting stories with the Tzemach Tzedek. As a young child, he used to sit on his grandfather's lap, and Chassidim used to see a lot of interesting stories. One of them is an interesting, cute story, but a very powerful story. And that is one time this young Menachem Mendel was sitting on the lap of his grandfather. And his grandfather asked him, tell me, Vu is Zayda? Where is Zaidi? Where is Zaidi? So the young child points to his forehead. Here's Zaidi. Says, no, that's Zaidi's forehead. Where is Zaidi? Okay, points to his eyes. No, that's Zaidi's eyes. Where is Zaidi? Points to the nose, points to his mouth, points to his heart, points to any other limb, any other body part. This is Zaidi's heart. This is Zaidi's foot. This is Zaidi's hand. Where is Zaidi? Okay, he's stumped. A while later, maybe the same day, a few minutes later, sometime later, the Tzemach Tzedek was outside of the room and he got stuck in the door or something, and he calls out, Zaidi! And the grandfather turns to him, says, yeah. So the young boy says, oh, there is Zaidi. Cute, but powerful. Zaidi is not a body part. It's not our face. It's not our head. It's not our brain. It's not our heart. This is Zaidi's brain. This is Zaidi's heart. Zaidi is Zaidi. The person is the person. This is the soul, the personality. This is who we are. We have a body. We are enclosed in the body. And that's, by the way, why this is eternal, right? Because the person lives before and after the body. But that's besides the point. But even while the person is alive, we talk through the face of the person, through the body, but we're not talking to the body. How often do we talk to someone and, hey, you're not really listening. I'm talking to you. You're looking straight at me, but you're not present, right? You ever told that to your spouse, right? Because it's not about talking to this, to the body. You're talking to the soul, right? That's what's okay. I need it to be manifest in something physical because we're all physical, right? But we value the soul over the body. And the same is true with the animal life and vegetation and even inanimate things. Any physical thing, there's the physical body of it, but we have to recognize that there's the physical, but there's also the spiritual. And if there's the spiritual, what do I value? I have to value the spirit. I have to value the soul because the soul is really what it's all about. So this is also with any actions, any experience that we have to value the soul of it. But even with every inanimate things, we have to realize that godliness is really all around us. And we have to utilize this and live true to the soul of everything around us. And that's what in text 13, we have in the second paragraph, the idea of good and evil, or life and death. And this is, you see this in text 14, where this is the actual verse from Deuteronomy, where we have over here what it says in Deuteronomy. It says, this day I call upon heaven and earth as witnesses that I have warned you. I have set before you life and death, and blessing and the curse. You shall choose life so that you and your offsprings will live. Really? How profound. God is telling us to choose life. Who wouldn't choose life? Any healthy human being will choose life, obviously. We need a directive from God. Oh, remember, don't choose death. Choose life. Yay. I mean, this is what the Torah has to tell us. So what does the text 13 teach us? No, it's not so simple. It's actually a pretty tough challenge that God is giving us over here. When we're saying life and death, we're not talking about living a physical life or dying. Of course, we choose life. We're talking about life and death, body and soul. Like we mentioned, the body of everything is lifeless, because even though it's here now, it's only here because it's being given life by its soul. But there's no independent life. It's not eternal life. It's not truly here. Think of let's say a projector. You're projecting a video or a photo on the screen. So if I only look at the screen, what do I see? Wow, a beautiful movie. It's wonderful. But truthfully, what is it? All it is lights coming out of the projector. The moment they press off, done. There's nothing on the screen. It looks just so real. You go to a movie theater, you can almost like feel like these people are in front of you with the sound and everything. It's so visual, it's so real. You can forget that all it is lights coming out from a projector. That's what life is really all about. We get carried away with the body of everything, but it's not real. It's not alive. It's death. Death as in it's no independent eternal life. It's only dependent on the projector. It's only dependent on its soul. So when we go through an experience, we could get carried away with the body of things. We go out for a dinner with our companion. We can say, hey, I love the food. And it's all about the food. And we forget about the soul of this companionship, of this relationship. We get carried away with it. And that's because we are physical human beings. And naturally, we are driven to physicalities. But we should also be thinking about the soul of things. Sometimes it's pretty simple and pretty easy. It's not too hard. But sometimes it can be very, very challenging. And the Torah tells us, "Ubacharta b'chayim," and it gives us that ability, it gives us the koyach, the strength, that we should be able to choose life in every situation. We should see the life around us. Anything and everything that we see, that we experience, we should see that this is only a manifestation of God's energy. Yes. Well, I think she had a question first. You still.
What happens when somebody's brain dead? What happens to the soul?
Saying, when they're alive but they're brain dead? Okay, so this soul is not necessarily a cognitive soul, which means even if the body, the person is brain dead, but as long as they are still alive, they have this soul. Unfortunately, it's not able to interact as it was when the person had the brain. But this is not so connected to how the person uses their soul. But here we're talking about a person who's alive. They have that soul. Yes. But good question. Yeah.
So I agree with you, I mean, like this course, it's like focusing on the importance of the spiritual. But I thought Judaism is teaching us that we need the physical self to do the mitzvahs. And so it places so much emphasis on the physical part doing the mitzvahs, saying like, yeah, but when you're spiritual, you can't do the mitzvahs, and that's what God wants us to do. So is this just like a whole separate kind of thing that you're teaching, or you're not really focusing, like saying one's better than the other? I mean, it sounds like you're saying one is better than the other. We need to focus on this. Am I not right that Judaism really focuses on the physical?
I think they go hand in hand, right?
Well, I think they go hand in hand too, but it seems like in my learning, I've been learning like, gotta do physical.
Okay, great question. I'm just going to repeat the question to first of all make sure I understand the question and for everyone to hear.
Okay.
So what Jill is asking is that seemingly we're putting a lot of emphasis and a lot of focus on the spiritual tonight, but seemingly we know that the purpose of it all, we hear this a million times from any Chabad rabbi, that the main thing is physical action, do a mitzvah, right? Living here in the spirit, in the physical world. We don't, souls up in heaven are great experience, but that's not the purpose of it all. The purpose is that we should be here and do a mitzvah over here. Great question. And not only is it not a contradiction, but this actually is exactly what we're saying over here. This is text 13. What's text 13 telling us? That we're living a physical life. But what's the purpose of it all? Every time we do a physical mitzvah, what are we doing? We are taking and seeing this physical item as its spirit. We see it for the mitzvah of it. Okay. So this is also an action item. We got to do physical mitzvahs. Why? Because the physical it's not truly physical. It's a manifestation of God.
Right.
When we take a mezuzah, a physical parchment and we write the mezuzah on it, hang it on, what are we doing? We're saying this parchment, it's not really parchment. It's godliness manifest into a parchment. So now let me figure out, what does the soul want of itself?
Okay, got it.
Oh, this soul wants that there should be a mezuzah, right? When we're doing anything, any physical action, well, I'm drinking coffee. Well, why am I drinking coffee? Because the body of the coffee is tasty and it gives me the energy that I need, or because the soul of the coffee is crying out to say, please use me to give yourself energy to study Torah, right? So it's both a physical action item, but it's the perspective. I'm taking the physical and I'm revealing that the physical is only a manifestation of the spiritual. That is really what the point is all about. I could say hitbodedut, which is what I skipped, which is kind of disengaging from the material life and going out there in the forest and kind of connecting to God that way, leaving the noise behind, the material noise behind. That's not what we're focusing on tonight, because on the contrary, we should take the physical and have that hyper engagement with the spirit of the physical. That is really what the purpose is all about. Okay, so now
Can I ask you something?
this brings, as the text 13 concludes, it really brings us to a great sense of love and yearning to God, realizing that there is God all around us, wherever we move. Everything is godliness, is spirituality. Really, it opens up the nature of spirituality and this possibility of experiencing the divine in every moment of life. So I want to mention, turn on the second meditation for tonight, and this is the meditation which kind of, we take all these ideas, which is a very academic and intellectual concept, but we also have to live it. And this is what the hitbonenut is really all about. We could study, which is step number one. We have to know what we are contemplating on. But then the meditation is to not only study it once or twice, but to live it. We got to live it. And that is through contemplation.
Can I ask you something, Rabbi?
There was once a great Professor Bronover. He was from Russia. And he, during communism, he was a refusenik, and he slowly started coming closer to Judaism, and he really connected with the Hasidic philosophy. He would study a lot, and he really enjoyed it. And one of his mentors was an older Hasid, and he once asked him, he says, you know so much about God, about godliness, and about the purpose of creation, and all these philosophical deep concepts. Where do you get it from? Where's it all from? So he pulled out of his pocket a little book of the Tanya. A little book. How big is it in original Hebrew? I mean, it's whatever it is, 100 pages. So he says, "Wow, that's it. When how long did it take you to read? How long did it take you to study?" And he says, "I'm still studying it. I studied it all my life." And that really kind of caught him by surprise, because he was an academic, he was a professor. And for him, you read a book once, you get the idea, you move on. Okay, you read it twice, but to read it again and again and again all your life, this is the idea of hitbonenut. Take the idea, you understand it, but you analyze it again and again and again, and you contemplate again and again until it becomes so real. You experience it, you feel it, you see it.
You always find something new. You always find something new when you learn it. Every time you learn it, you find something new. It's Louise.
Spirituality means to sense viscerally how meaningful every single moment and item of life is, which means to enter into a relationship soul to soul, and we can do so with everything that we find in our daily activities. So gently close your eyes and just become aware of a source of light in your head, pleasant, warm, spreading throughout your headspace, enlightening, animating, and flowing down into your lower body, feeling comfortable and warm. Intensify that light source so it spreads through your limbs, allowing them to feel animated, special, with Hashem's light, that light which is your soul's light. Everything possesses a soul spark. The stone also has a soul. If you peer into the stone and are able to see molecules, atoms, smaller particles even, all these are energies that are manifested. Beneath each of these lies a spiritual force. The spiritual force of a stone is nefesh. A flower also possesses a soul spark, but it's more developed. It's called ruach, allowing the flower to have locomotion, movement, growth, inclination towards the sun. It has both nefesh and ruach. The animal has an even more advanced soul system. It has the nefesh to maintain its physical state, ruach providing it with animation, movement, but also neshama, which provides it with rudimentary communication capacity. And then there's the human being, who possesses all three, plus the level of soul known as chaya, the level of soul that provides consciousness, awareness of the flow of time, present, past, and future, hopes, aspirations, values, beliefs. We encounter all four levels in life. Allow that encounter to be soul to soul, recognizing that everything possesses value, godliness, purpose, and only by relating spiritually to the essence of that soul do we connect meaningfully, live a deep and meaningful life.
So we started tonight's discussion with the assumption that perhaps spirituality is something distant and intangible. But I think we understand that spirituality is something that's very much part of our lives. It's all around us. It's wherever we are. And that we have to appreciate it. We have to take the time to understand it, to contemplate on these ideas and make it real. Contemplation doesn't come easy. Very often we have thoughts come into our mind. We try to contemplate. 5 seconds in, we're already wandering. We're thinking about other things. It's an exercise. We have to train our minds to stay focused. One thought for more than just 2-3 seconds. And the more we do it, the better we get at it. And we can do it for 20 seconds. We can do it for 30 seconds. We can do it for a minute, for 2 minutes. It's not easy. But the more we do it, and what we suggest is that when we study something, after we study, take a minute to kind of think about it. There's this concept that before we start praying, we take a few moments to think about a concept of the divine, this concept or other concept that we'll learn, to kind of train ourselves to not just know things, but to experience things in our minds. And then it becomes real to us. This concludes tonight's discussion. If you have any questions or comments, please, I'm here as long as you keep me. Next week, we will continue, same place, same time. We will continue on this idea and develop it even further, how God is very much present in our lives, constantly all around us, that we feel the presence of God. I just want to announce